Yeah.
WTBQ.
Good afternoon. Tony Abbatine, your host of Game On. Today we enter the world of scouting. How many of us have dreamed when we were young that we were going to be the next Mickey Mantle, the next Joe DiMaggio? Today we'll spend time with probably one of the biggest scouts in the, we're going to say the Northeast, but Super Scout John Tumminia from the Chicago White Sox, who we'll have on in a few minutes, will give us a real inside scoop as to what scouting is all about and how really it has affected and will continue to affect the Little League and even at the high school level evaluating talent. Before we bring John on, though, let's just talk about the reality. We watch baseball games, those of you that stayed up late enough last night to watch the World Series. How difficult is it to make a living playing the great sport of baseball? And if you think it, you've got 750 players that are on the major league roster, 30 teams, usually 20 to 25. If you break down the amount of players that are playing at the high school level, that comes out to about 1%. Think about it. 1% of all the people who play baseball will eventually make it to the major league level. Let's really drill down, and those of you that have been drafted or you know someone who was drafted in the minor leagues, 18%, and I'll say it again, 18% of minor leaguers have a chance to become the major league players that we watch on television. Does it mean that we tell our youngsters you should not dare to dream and think about playing center field for the Yankees or the Mets or the White Sox or whoever it might be? Absolutely not. The reality is, it will be very difficult, and at some point they might have to, we call it go to plan B, get a job, go to school, and continue in college and whatnot. But today really we want to find out, and for those of you that are coaching at the amateur level, how to interact with scouts, what to do if you think that your 9-year-old or 19-year-old has a level of talent that one day might allow him to make a living playing. This is really the crux of why we're going to be bringing on Super Scout John Tumminia. And even before we talk about the professional level, and again, make no mistake about it, your son, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, your son will probably not make a living playing Major League Baseball, evidenced by that less than 1% number. But at some point, amateur sports is really all about what? It's about participation, it's about confidence, it's about doing the best that you can and really sending a message to all the youngsters that you as coaches are around. Dare to dream, believe in anything that you can do, but at some point, education and having a plan B becomes the reality. Let's go down to the Little League level, and how good is good? I know at our frozen rope training centers across the country, we're constantly getting calls from Little League coaches, from a dad, Tony, my son is really, really good. Well, how do we define good? How fast is fast? How fast, whether it's a runner or how fast a pitcher might be. It's important for you as parents to understand, and it's easy. It's an easy formula that really over the last 20 years, if you take your son's age, right? For example, you've got a 10-year-old son. One of the ways in which you can determine if he's as good as you think that he might be, take his age, multiply that by 5. Okay, those of you that aren't doing real good math, I'll do it for you. 10 times 5 is 50. Go get a radar gun, borrow it from someone, and if your son is throwing 50 miles an hour, again, 10-year-old boy times 5 is 50, that's going to give you an indication that he is throwing in the top 10 percentile in the country. All right, so before you say that your son or daughter is the best of the best, the rule of 5 is, and it pertains all the way up into 18. An 11-year-old should be throwing 55 miles an hour if they're going to be in the top 10 percentile. You've got a 12-year-old phenom in Little League. How good is good? Well, if he's throwing 60 miles an hour, if you were to take all the Little Leaguers around the country, that 60 mile an hour would only be showing up in 1 of 10 of the players that we've surveyed. Go all the way up to 16. A 16-year-old throwing 80 miles an hour would give them in the top 10 percentile. And all the way up to 18, our rule of 5 number pertains all the way up to 18. An 18-year-old throwing 90 miles an hour will certainly be in that top 10%. So make sure that when you're looking and really defining as it relates to pitching or whatnot, use those parameters that might be helpful. Now joining us, I don't believe he's in Chicago. I had mentioned John Tumminia before. John is a 25-year veteran with the Chicago White Sox. The last 6 years, he's been a Major League scout covering both minor league and major league games. He is the former East Coast supervisor for the Chicago White Sox over the last 6 years, and he's been an area scout in the Hudson Valley for over 13 years. John, Tony Abbatine from Game On, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks a lot, Tony.
John, I have to call you because I guess 10 years ago you used the word guru when you were talking to the Times Herald Record about yours truly. So for this afternoon and for the show, you will be the Super Scout guru of the country.
Well, thank you for the compliment.
John, if you can, for those that are not as experienced in the world of Major League Baseball, could you explain the hierarchy within, and I'm sure the Chicago White Sox are no different than the Yankees or the Mets. Who do you report to, and who does your boss report to with the White Sox?
Well, in particular, what I'm doing now on the pro side is I report to a fellow by the name of Dan Fabian, who is our director of baseball operations, along with our general manager Kenny Williams. On the amateur side, the area scouts and the scouting supervisors would report to the scouting director, who would be Doug Lauman at this time.
Now, is that somewhat the same hierarchy, John, within all the different organizations? The scouting director, the supervisor, the general manager.
Pretty much. There's a basic standardization and chain of command that's running in the majority of the 30 teams. The
one call that came in, John, before actually came in yesterday, and this really pertains to your coverage at professional games when fans go to see, whether it's at Citi Field or Yankee Stadium, they see scouts behind the backstop, behind home plate. Without giving away all the trade secrets of the Chicago White Sox, our listening audience really wants to know, what the heck are you guys doing there? And the fact that you're getting paid to watch a Major League Baseball game. One caller asked if you get free food, and I kind of knew the answer to that. I said, I don't think so. But if you can give our audience just kind of a bird's eye view at the professional level, when you're sitting behind watching Mariano Rivera or Johan Santana pitch, or evaluating Jose Reyes for a trade, what goes on in that back area?
Well, Tony, there's a lot of things that are happening through a scout's eye. Most scouts are constantly looking and writing, and they're evaluating from head to toe every movement that a ball player on the field is performing. Whether it's a pitcher or an infielder, an outfielder, or a catcher, they have to report and write up every player that they see. Now, what does that entail? Well, that entails a great deal. For example, both on the amateur and the pro side, you're evaluating the 5 tools, and at this point, I think most of us know what those tools are: hitting with power, running, fielding, and catching. But there are other aspects of the game that are being looked at. For example, athletic position players. Scouts are looking for players who can play defense and run and bunt and are capable of situational hitters. Scouts are looking for makeup. Well, it's hard to do that on the pro level, but there's ways of finding out about the intangibles, things you cannot see with the eye, for example, things that make the difference between a guy who's a solid average player and the makeup that will carry another guy to be above average. Some of the other things that they're looking at, and believe it or not, they're looking at on-base percentage. The OBP is becoming very important. A young player who's over .380 should be considered with attention. They're looking at walks to strikeouts. Good hitters, have solid walk to strikeout ratio, at least 1 to 2. If you see a 1 to 3, it's kind of poor, and it doesn't really translate well at the major league level going forward. They're also looking for, when they're looking at power, looking at doubles and power potential. 11% of major league hitters posted 20-plus home runs in Double-A, but 81% had a double rate of at least 6 doubles per, for example, 100 ABs. So there's a lot of things being factored in, and they're looking at, for example, on a scale of 20 to 80, 50 being average, a big league power hitter who was a 50 would be maybe 17, 18 home runs. He would have around a 265, 270 average. They're looking at how he runs to first base, for example. A right-handed batter runner would, on the average, is 4.3, where on the left side is 4.2. And, interesting enough, what you were mentioning about the pitching grading scale, that a lefty would at 89, 90 would be average, and a righty, 90, 91 would be what we call, again, average, which would be 50, 55-ish. So there's a lot of things going on, and there's more and more scouts today who, because there's so many things happening between relief pitchers coming in and this, that, and the other, they have cameras. They have flip cameras. They take pictures of players, and when they go back into their lab, which is in front of their computer after the game, they are putting that up on the screen, and they're reevaluating what they might have missed with their own eyes.
So there's
very detailed.
There's an awful lot being done there, John. So when fans and others think that you're just simply BSing with your colleagues, that's not accurate.
Exactly.
John, if you could, you mentioned, and again, we certainly, thanks to Moneyball, and I don't know if you've seen the movie that just came out, and we can talk maybe later on about the pros and cons of Moneyball. But again, at the amateur level, most of our listeners, whether they're high school travel coaches, we've got college coaches also. You mentioned the running and the times to first base. Let's look at the 60-yard dash. Most of the time, the 60-yard dash, which is really the initial industry standard for running. Can you give us some indication what would be considered average as it relates to a baseball player, let's say coming out of high school?
Well, I think the time on the 60 is under 7 is a good time. The 60. I think the 40 to the 60 is a good indicator of, a time that is going to be comparable from home to first. But, and this is a big but, it's how a player gets out of the box. He could have great 40 or 60 time, and if you just run him from home plate and say, go, the first, and run through first base, he can have a great time. But when he's up at the plate and he has to make contact, and at the same time on the follow-through, like an Ellsbury does very well, and an Ichiro, it's how they pivot and turn and torque out of that box to get up and through first base.
John, I would agree. John, if I can interrupt, I would agree. But why is there so much emphasis put on the 60? You see that over and over again. Some of the scouts in this area, they'll see players working out and whatnot. And while he ran a 7.2, Mike Bertotti, certainly a name that you know who's in the area. Mike, you know what? He's a below-average runner at 7.2. To me, and maybe this is a different way of looking at it, you never run 180 feet in a baseball game. This whole reliance on linear speed, running 60 yards straight, again, in my opinion, has no relevance to the game itself. Yes, it's an indication of sheer speed, but as you described so effectively, it's all about first step quickness. It's all about acceleration. It's all about proper balance and how you finish your swing. Yet the 60-yard dash is the first thing that kids do when they go to one of your workouts.
Well, I think, Tony, that could be one of those dinosaur type of things that, it gives somewhat of a barometer, but it's not accurate. And just jumping and not changing the subject, but since you brought Moneyball, and I did see the movie twice, actually.
Right.
And, yes, there's a lot of what was said in the movie that's important. For example, when he mentioned, I don't need you to steal second base. I need you to get on base.
Right.
And then I need to see how well you run from first to third.
Right.
Those are things that are somewhat overlooked at times, but are important.
John, staying with the evaluation, if we can, give our audience some indication of, again, in the industry, it's called pop time. The catcher's ability to take that good fastball, preferably close to the plate, and throw it to second base. And again, we know what a high school player does. His times are certainly going to be different than a college catcher, and certainly different than a Molina, who we watched last night with the St. Louis Cardinals. What's the average for the catchers on their transfer throw to second base?
Well, I'm going to just answer that by saying I never time the catchers throwing down to second base. I really don't feel comfortable with those times. I'm sort of at the point now in my career where I watch the arm strength. I watch how quick the release is. I watch the hand exchange. I watch how he gets on top of the ball and adds some hop and ride to it rather than throwing a two-seamer that looks like it appears to be tailing and dipping and sinking.
So you're relying more on you're relying more on your eyes than that stopwatch, John.
When it comes to the catchers, I'm kind of putting that stopwatch to the side a little bit. I'm putting that stopwatch to the side a bit, actually. And I don't like to say to a kid, your time was this, because it becomes a little bit too abstract. It's not accurate for me.
John,
when I do the evaluation on a catcher, I look at what I just said, and including his footwork, which is a big determinator of how quick he releases, and all of that factors in for me.
We might actually have a Philadelphia Philly fan on the phone wanting to ask a question. Is this Robert from Philly?
This is.
Robert, Tony Abbatine from Game On. We've got John Tumminia from the Chicago White Sox on the line. Philly fan or White Sox fan?
Philly fan.
Okay. Fire away with your question to John.
What I'm wondering is, when you're evaluating players, both at the high school and the college level, are the players' tools more important than the actual ability the player has at that moment? And if they are, do you look at them differently if they're a high school player as compared to a college player?
John, it sounds like the classic projection, right, where scouts and scouting directors get fired on or fired in the event that their projections are off. What do you think, John?
Well, if you're asking me, do I evaluate the tools on a high school and college player? Absolutely. I'm looking at how crude the tools might be, how undefined. I'm looking at how much skill development is going to be needed to get those tools to a certain point where he's going to be that player. I mean, that's what they did in Moneyball. They in the movie, they were evaluating Bean's tools. And at that time in high school, his tools were off the chart. They never maturated to that point, and there's a lot of factors that go in between. But for me as a scout, even on the pro side, on the minor league side, especially with the younger minor league kids, I look at tools. And as they get older and they're in the system a little longer and they make it to the big leagues, then the performance standards enter in a little bit more. So, for example, Lee Mazzilli, when he was in high school, he only batted .214. He was a number 1 draft pick for the New York Mets. Now, if you had to look at his batting average and his stats, they weren't good. But if you looked at his tools, they were off the chart. And those tools, on top of the makeup and the intangibles and the player development, got him to the big leagues.
Hey, John, we keep referring to the tools, and I know you mentioned it quickly. Those that are not in the industry, if you can, one last time before we go to the break, let's break down what should be in the toolbox again one more time for all those coaches out there.
Well, you got the physical tools that include hitting, and when we talk about hitting, situational hitting, line drive hitting, using the entire field. Being able to adapt to certain pitches. We have power is another tool. Guys who can lift the ball, gap to gap, pole to pole, line drive power, loft power. We have the fielding abilities that are broken down between, again, the scale is 2 to 8. You have the arm as far as arm strength and release, depending upon what pitcher, what position, if you're a shortstop, second baseman, and the accuracy thereof. And you have the running, the speed. There's guys they just have average speed, but they have high numbers of stolen bases because they have instincts and reactions to be able to steal bases. So those are the physical tools. And then you have the mental toolbox. The mental toolbox is very important.
John, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about one of your favorite topics, player development and red flags in a pitching delivery. We'll be back with Super Scout John Tumminia briefly.
You don't have time to sit around and think about the news. Your life is busy. Your life is on a budget. There is one place you can count on to help you save time, save money. ShopRite. One place where thousands of items are on sale every week. Where you can save even more when you check out with our Price Plus card. One place where you can be confident you get the value and the quality you want for your family every time you shop. One place, your place. ShopRite.
Hi, this is Joe Dans. Please join me every Wednesday at 1 p.m. on WTBQ for my show on creativity and technology for business and life, where we help you connect the dots in these challenging times.
Teaching you to save more, spend less, and avoid getting ripped off. He's Clark Howard.
I listen for him to tell about all the fraudulent things that's going on.
Clark Howard.
Weekdays from 2 to 4, WTBQ.
WTBQ weather.
A typical fall afternoon for the area, partly sunny, some cloudy periods. Breezy and cool, high 55 to 60. Variably cloudy weather tonight, cool once again. Diminishing winds, however. A combination of sunshine and cloudiness tomorrow, much less breezy, high 55 to 60. And for Sunday, a nice finish to the weekend, mostly sunny, high close to 60. From the WTBQ Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Ken Elliott.
WTBQ.
Hi, this is Tony Abbatine. We are back with Chicago White Sox scout John Tumminia. John, before we continue to grill you both in the area in scouting and player development, we have to give a shout out to our friends at AAU Baseball, one of our main sponsors, for continuing to believe that baseball is the greatest sport played in the United States and abroad. John, in staying with, if we could, let's talk about pitching. I know over the years you've seen some of the best arms in the Hudson Valley area, both at the high school level and going on to college. Names like Tim Spindler, Matt Morris, or Robbie Bell. I don't know if you saw coming out of college Jason Mott, who pitched last night for the St. Louis Cardinals. But again, if you could give some good advice, and again, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here because now you're the farm director, you're player development. What are you seeing, even at the professional level, in delivery issues? Well, we're talking pitching now, right? You've got a 13 or 14-year-old boy that's out there. What can some of the coaches identify and start realizing is the beginning of either injury or possibly just simply lack of performance, i.e. speed, when this player gets over? You're now the pitching coach of the White Sox, John.
Well, farm directors always hope that, and their coaches, they always hope that the scouting department is going to draft pitchers that have clean arm action. Their delivery is pretty compact, and they're able to come over the rubber and have good follow through. And that's one of the reasons why player development and scouting go hand in hand. But there are a couple of things that I'll mention here, especially, and this applies to both young and the older pitchers. The arm action length, for example, we try to break it down by looking at, is it long? Is there a long arch behind the body? If it's long, deception could be an issue. Is it full? A solid arm swing with the ability to hide the ball, which is desirable. Is it short with an abbreviated arch? That could lead to command and health issues down the road. Let's look at arm action faults, for example. A young fella that hooks, or he has a wrist cup around the ball. He's got to compensate by staying over the rubber, and 90% of the time, he's not going to be able to acquire that. You have guys who stab, for example, in the rear. Their hand goes straight down behind the back, and it could be deceptive at times, but over years of research, there's been, injury concerns. How about the overall delivery types? A guy who's a power pitcher, a sink and slider guy, a drop and drive guy, or a violent head popper. These are all factors that factor in as far as balance and angle and stride and some of the biggest things that I look for in the delivery floors, for example, is if a guy is rushing, if he's side to side, if his back is arching, if he's landing open, if he lands overly close. I mean, these are some of the yellow to red lights. But I've learned over the years, and I want to make a point of this, since the days when you and I were evaluating the Tim Spindlers, that sometimes we could be, scouts can, a little bit overly critical. And I remember the day when we were looking at Tim Spindler and we were trying to clean up this and that, but Tony Abbatine would say to me, "But John, how does the ball look when it crosses the plate?" And you know what? That's a very, very good point, because you could have some of these delivery faults, but if you got a guy who's got 60 life, 60, 65 life, again, out of that scale of 20 to 80, that's a pretty good, that's a green light for me. And that's where I've come over the last 25 years, that the way it comes across that plate, his location, his movement, and he gets people out, he gets ground ball outs. A big bonus for me.
John, in New York, we're very blessed, and I know over the years A lot of our frozen rope locations have studied and watched Mariano Rivera and his delivery. I know I was so impressed with it almost 15 years ago that he really was the catalyst behind our pitching program, and it was aptly named Calm Before the Storm. What are some of the deliveries that you see now at the major league level that an amateur coach can look at and try to have that young pitcher emulate? Who's out there? Obviously, Rivera always jumps out. His effortlessness, his ability to repeat his delivery. At some point in our show, we're going to talk about what makes him so special down the road. But who else is out there that some of our listeners could watch and hopefully learn from?
Well, Mariano Rivera, and every time I cover the Yankees year after year, I write two things on my report. Number one, he's not human. And number two, he could pitch until he's 60. Or whenever he feels like he doesn't want to pitch anymore.
Right.
That's how great Mariano Rivera. And why is he great? He doesn't throw the ball hard. He doesn't have five different pitches in his repertoire. What he does is he's got the cleanest delivery, pitcher perfect, that any pitcher should try to emulate. But not every pitcher is going to be able to do so. What he also has is he has movement, and he knows where the ball is going. He can put the ball exactly where he wants to. And the third part is that he has great focus. When he's out there in the most toughest situations over the many, many years, there is not one person in that ballpark, even though there might be 50,000 people. So he's a tremendously gifted individual. Now, there's not too many people, like I just said, who's going to be able to match that. But you're going to have some pitchers, for example, the Yankees. A.J. Burnett, he's got great electric stuff across the plate. It's just a matter of how he can command and control over more than 4 or 5 innings in a game. But even at his age, he's got great stuff. CC Sabathia, great deception, knows how to pitch. What he can do that's very well is he can size up hitters. And even when he's struggling with his 1-2 pitch, he could use his 3rd and 4th pitch to rely on that to get people out. The kid Robertson, who's in the bullpen, has been developing over the last couple of years. He's got a decent delivery. His stuff is good. His curveball is great. His fastball has more velo now, and he's putting it in the right spot. So, every pitcher is different, as well as every hitter is different. And we can't, as we've learned over the years, we can't make everyone the same, but we try to take the tools, we try to take whatever talent they have and stir it up, break it down, build it up so that you can get the best product on the field on a daily basis. And I really believe, and I said this years ago, what you said in the beginning of the show, that what you did years ago when you started the Frozen Ropes was really being the guru of pitching and of hitting and bringing very good people in, not just people who are going to be camp counselors, but training your instructors, everybody on the same page, having a mission statement, and in a Frozen Ropes lab, a young person can really learn a lot about their body, about what's inside their head, and then leave the Frozen Ropes and go on the field and perform with confidence.
And John, that's always been really for the last, I've known you for almost 20 years now, and it's not as if we have all the answers at our locations, but, darn it, we're looking for them. And, we talked in show number 1 about how video analysis has really helped in being able to break down swings and breaking down pitching, yet sometimes we have to be careful that when we break it down, sometimes we can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. and we lose that intangible. But when you look at the 11 to 12, 13-year-old, right, and let's even, you look at the American kids that are out there, and yes, we all know that Major League Baseball is a international phenomenon. Yet I'm asked many times, Tony, where are the American kids? Where, you look at the Riveras and the Molinas and the Santanas and the Rodriguezes and all players who have tremendous talent who were not born and raised in the continental United States. What, if anything, do we need to be doing better at the amateur level in this country to give some other boys a chance? And this is something that really continues to be a challenge for all of us. And we can talk about video games and this Generation X that doesn't exercise and whatnot, but to me that's a cop-out. We need some solutions. You're backtracking now, John. You got an 11 or 12-year-old son that's playing Little League. What would you do with him? How could you better prepare him to at least have an opportunity? Not to play in the big leagues, because we talked about the percentages there, but how do you get this hypothetical 11 or 12-year-old son of yours to be the best player in the Cornwall Little League and then be the best player on the Cornwall High School team and maybe have a chance to participate at a Division II baseball program? What would you do?
Well, when a young person falls in love, a 7, 8-year-old, 11-year-old, when they fall in love with baseball, there really is nothing that's going to stop them. Nintendo games, soccer, football, going to the movies, watching TV, all the distractions that we give reasons as to why baseball doesn't attract as it used to the American child, the American boy. Yeah, there is a deficiency in that area. I mean, I was just talking to my roofer, and I asked him, does your son play baseball? And he says, no. I go, why not? He goes, it's too slow for him. So there's a lot of different reasons why the kids in America are not playing. But there is that American boy and boys who just fall in love with the smell of the leather glove. So they look at the bat and they hold it in their hands and they go, I want to be able to do something with this bat. I want to hit that ball, and I want to hit it well. And I'm going to practice, and I'm going to practice. My parents don't have to tell me to practice. That young person that has that inside them, they're out there. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to the Dominican Republic next week, as you know. I'm going to see a group of kids, 200 kids one day, 400 kids now another day, who are coming out of the woodwork because they don't have the things that we have, for example, in our country, the TV, regular running water, hot water showers, other sports to compete with. They have, and they want to learn about baseball because they have seen fellow Dominicans go through the system, become big stars, and make a lot of money. And they're hungry. So on one token, we have the international prospectus who's hungry, who wants it, who wants a chance. And, yeah, we still do have that American boy and American girls, too, when it comes to softball, who they want that. So it becomes a desire factor, the attraction to the game, whether you're in China or Asia, America, or Germany, and that has to be the case, or else you wouldn't be having all these frozen ropes all over the world.
John, when we come back, we're going to talk about wood bats interacting with scouts, and we're going to flip over to hitting. We're talking with John Tumminia of the Chicago White Sox. We'll be back in a minute.
You don't have time to sit around and think about the news. Your life is busy. Your life is on a budget. There is one place you can count on to help you save time, save money. ShopRite. One place where thousands of items are on sale every week. Where you can save even more when you check out with our Price Plus card. One place where you can be confident you get the value and the quality you want for your family every time you shop. One place, your place. ShopRite.
Are you searching for peace of mind and a purposeful life? WTBQ's Spiritual Healing Radio can provide you with God-directed answers. Mondays at 6 p.m. on WTBQ. Welcome, good heart.
I'm Betty Hurd.
And I'm Michael Bertolini.
On our program, Warwick Then and Now, we discuss Warwick's historic past and the ongoing work of the Warwick Valley Historical Society.
Every Monday at 1 p.m. on WTBQ.
WTBQ.
Hi, Tony Abbatine back with Game On, and John Tumminia from the Chicago White Sox, our special guest today. We are broadcasting live at WTBQ in Warwick, New York, and also via the internet on frozenropes.com. We received a few email questions and comments. John, you're lighting up the airwaves. Everyone wants you to work with their son and come into their living room maybe 5 years from now with that big multi-million-dollar signing bonus. The interesting kind of dialogue going back and forth, and the audience can certainly appreciate John's background. Besides being a scout at so many different levels, he gets it. He understands that it's about teaching the game, and really the best scouts that I've had an opportunity to interact with, they love to teach. You know, they get paid to evaluate and project. But at the end of the day, that love for the game, John mentioned before about falling in love with your first Rawlings glove or the smell of the bat or the crack of the wooden bat. Most scouts, they love what they're doing. John, a question that kind of came in, and again, more so at the amateur level, it's going to happen in June, where the amateur draft, as most of us know, is in June, and you'll see some of the area scouts out watching high school games, watching college games. What exactly is permissible for a parent as it relates to talking or walking over to a major league scout who happens to be at a high school or a college game, either watching their son or just watching a game in particular?
Well, I mean, I would always enjoy when I was covering the amateur side when the parents would come up to me and ask me questions and introduce themselves and, ask me questions about hitting and, can you take a look at my son? He's getting up next. And, questions of that sort for me, I try to be very approachable. And I would hope that other scouts feel the same. Sometimes scouts look like they're distant. They're at a distance because they're concentrating and bearing down. But I would welcome parents to converse with me. As a matter of fact, sometimes I would walk down into the stands and sit at the first base or the third base side and just sit there and listen and watch the game. And if parents would ask me questions, I would be more than happy to. And I would recommend that parents should do that. If you do see scouts, of course, mindful of not interrupting them if they're in a group, but, ask them, pull them over to the side and say, hey, look, let's talk about how my son stands at the plate, his feet, his legs, his hands, how his lower half moves in relationship with his upper half, and a scout will basically give you some answers to try to improve your son's performance.
John, you mentioned you mentioned the hitting before, and I know we talked about pitching, and we certainly could talk for a whole hour on hitting in the setup. Again, from the scouting eyes, and really it's about what the high school and even the college coaches are looking at. We break down the swing into what we call a setup position. Just do you look like a hitter right from the get-go, right? Are your what we call your pre-actions? Do you have a little bit of a dance in the stance, if you will? Do you have balance at the end of the swing? You mentioned before about how the lower half and the upper body have to work together. For the young high school coaches, for the travel coaches, provide them some insight on what eventually a scout might be looking for, both even before the swing starts and even afterwards.
Well, there's two things. There's two things here that I'd like to talk about within that answer. First of all, it's very important for coaches on the lower level who get the younger kids right from the beginning before they go to junior high school and high school to work on top to bottom. And scouts, for example, like myself, on a minor or major league level, also look at the same things. It's like a pitcher throwing to the same target. Everybody has to throw to the glove. Now, with the hitters, when I break a guy down, his mechanics, I look at how he stands in the plate. If he's up on the plate, is he centering the plate? Is he off the plate? Is he deep in the box? Is he up on the box? I'm looking about if his feet are straight, if his feet are pointed out, does he have duck feet? Does he have a wide base? Does he have a narrow base? Is he semi-crouched? Does he stand tall? Does he have good weight transfer in the middle with his hips to and from? Where is the position of his bat? Does he have what we call helmet hands, neck hands, or chest hands with the bat in reference to his setup?
You mentioned all those observations. How the heck would a high school or a Little League coach know what's right?
What becomes right is based on from the stance to the point of contact, how that young kid makes contact. He could do a lot of different things that maybe the book says you shouldn't do. But like the pitcher, where the ball comes through the zone and it's a 60 life to it, and all the other stuff is a little bit, we got to change that a bit. When he makes at the point of contact, the angle of the point of contact, if it works, if he performs, then you may not want to tweak the kid as much. If he's not making good contact and he's squaring off on the ball and he can't hit a curveball and he can't adjust to a slider, or he's out in front on a changeup, then you start looking at, what I'm saying from head to toe, keeping a kid back, making him be a little bit more patient, talking to him about, visualization and what are you actually looking at. I mean, you've seen it. There's kids that commit themselves before they even know where the ball is.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of growth factor with a young 8, 9, 11-year-old, and there's going to be a lot of mistakes, and there's going to be a lot of growing pains, and they're going to be discouraged. But when they make contact and they hit the ball and they drive in a run, there's where the confidence level continues to maturate, and it's not an easy process, and it's not an easy answer.
Well, John, it's interesting, and you mentioned visualization, and I know you're certainly aware of some of the consulting work that I've done for major league teams in the way of pitch recognition and understanding the whole see the ball, as simple and as complex as that is. You've got just thousands of minor league hitters who have better bat speed, better strength levels than their major league counterparts, but just can't hit because of that. And you're seeing it even at the amateur level now. We've got these, I call them the robo hitters, these kids who have gone to one particular school of hitting, and they look the same and they swing the same. And off the tee and soft toss, they look like Mickey Mantle. The game starts, and they perform like Mickey Mouse. And it really gets back to we've lost, I think, as a teaching industry, we've lost and gotten away from the most important part of the swing, and that's seeing it. And I think you're right. If at the end of the day, that funny little 10-year-old does all these funky little things and his hand position isn't what the book says, whatever that book is, yet he's able to center a ball and be able to get his hands to 3 different, we call lanes on that home plate, he probably has some pretty good visual skills. He's seeing it much better than that 9 or 10-year-old that, might have the good swing, but can't hit. And I think that really gets back to, you kind of teach what you know. Most Little League coaches, most well-intended high school coaches, and even the college coaches that we run into, there's just way too much talk and discussion on the mechanics of the swing, when at the end of the day, once the game starts, it's all about pitch recognition. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, look, I don't want to show my age, and I think you have listeners who are in their 50s, I'm sure. And going back to some of the players when I was growing up who did almost everything incorrectly, and I'm not saying to do things incorrectly, but if you look at a Matty Alou, a Jesus Alou, a Roberto Clemente, even a Willie Mays, bailing out and, pulling his head out but still hitting a 425, 450-foot home run. It's how they saw the ball and how and where they made contact with the ball. And that's what hitting a baseball should be about.
John, when can you tell? And we're running out of time, and this has been great. Our listeners could listen to you all afternoon as I've enjoyed our conversations at ballparks over the years. When can you tell if you have something special with your son? I mean, and again, you're not out there evaluating at the Little League level. I'm asked this question all the time. Tony, when do you know? When is it time to go out and get the high-performance trainers and the nutritionists and the weightlifting and whatnot? When do you know, or when does someone like yourself, if you are watching a Little League game or even a junior varsity baseball game, when can you tell if that particular person might have the tools, as you mentioned before, to maybe make a living doing this?
Well, I can only answer that by bringing up a pitcher that you mentioned earlier in the show, and that was Robbie Bell. Robbie Bell was a kid that was pitching in the summer. He was in middle school, first year middle school. How old was that?
Probably 14, 15.
Okay. I think maybe Robbie was about 12 or 13 at the time, and I was out in the outfield watching a softball game, my daughter's softball game, and I saw this tall, young pitcher with sloppy mechanics all over the place. Could not get the ball over the plate. And his coach would go out there and try to, whatever he had to say, and I don't know what he was saying to him, but it wasn't working because he was throwing every pitch wild in the dirt. And I went up to that kid after the game, handed him my card, and I said to him, "You're going to be in the major league someday." Well, the kid looked at me like I was absolutely off the wall. But how did I make that determination?
John, we've got about 1 minute left, and you answered my question right on the button. Here was a young Robbie Bell at 12 or 13, right? Probably showed some arm strength and just some throwing skills that who would have been able to forecast 5 or 6 years later when he was a draft pick by a major league team and at some point actually got to the big leagues. I've always said at 12 or 13, you can start looking at the physical skills and whatnot, but you mentioned it before and it was right on the button, right? It's about those intangibles. It's about the passion level. Is that young 12 or 13-year-old going to be self-motivated? John, I can't thank you enough. Safe travels as you head to the Dominican Republic. John Tumminia from the Chicago White Sox. You can come on anytime and talk about the greatest game ever, John, baseball.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you for inviting me. It was fun, and I really enjoyed it. Take care.